It's been a busy spring, and so far we've planted 5 different batches of quick rotation crops or fast growing spring crops into the 5 beds of the polytunnel and another 4 batches outside. We planted each bed with 9 or 10 crops, and we tried to stagger the planting of each bed by about 2 or 3 weeks so that we could get a continuous supply of a lot of the crops rather than a glut all at once. And of course, in each bed or succession, we sowed radishes, which are possibly the fastest crop we can grow, with the least amount of time between sowing the seeds and harvesting the roots. We've been doing a pretty good job of harvesting most of these radishes when they're at their prime, when they're still small and tender. And generally we've been able to finish one batch in one bed, just as the next batch in another bed is starting to be ready to harvest. Or at least that was the case in the polytunnel. I kind of forgot about the plants outside. A few days ago, I noticed that the first batch of radishes that we had direct sown into the outside beds in the middle of February have already grown to be bigger than I would normally want them to get. With so many things to transplant and harvest in the polytunnel, I hadn't been paying attention to what was going on outside. And the radishes were kind of in the middle of the bed and seemed fairly small at a distance. But I was disappointed when I pulled back the leaves to see that some of the roots had grown really big. My first thought was to simply pull them out and compost them because I figured they'd be tough and fibrous, but they're actually quite tender and juicy and really flavorful. I guess there's been fairly good growing conditions this spring for this type of crop, and the plants were spaced fairly far apart, possibly because the germination rate wasn't as good as it could have been. The poor germination, which is normally something that I don't like to see, actually benefited in this case, as each of the plants had more space to grow fairly big without getting stressed. Now we have a glut of radishes to deal with, as there's still some to harvest inside the polytunnel. This first batch outside is definitely needing to be harvested, and the second batch that we sowed in the outside beds looks like it's just getting to a nice size for harvesting. So our plans to have succession cropping didn't really work out, as there was too much of an overlap between the crops inside the polytunnel and in the outside beds, at least with this, the fastest growing crop.